Thanks for having me. So this is old work. I started this a long time ago, and I'll tell you a little bit of the story behind it. And I didn't quite know what to do with it, so I put it aside, and then I tried it again later, and then I updated it with more data, and then I tried it again. And then recently I gave a paper at Irvine when Ed was my discussant, and it made me think I should redo this again through a different lens. And so the goal here is reorganizing some empirical regularities that are interesting and try to frame them a little bit differently. Yeah, so it's about goods in real estate markets. Okay, so the quote here is this one. So I went to when I was a rookie instructor at USC, I went to a Clippers game with a donor who was rumored to be worth $600 to $800 million. We were going to raise him money, and so they sent this professor to go along. And so I went along to the Clippers game. I ended up buying the beer, which was interesting. That's how I got wealthy, exactly. But after a couple of beers, and he was a nice guy, and he was very honest, and he was one of these guys who was going to tell you the truth all the time, no matter what was going on. So I got comfortable, and I asked him. I said, "So how do you make that much money?" And before he could answer, I said, "What was your business plan? Did you ever have a business plan to make $600 million?" Like I didn't. That's it. We all try to get ahead in life, but I don't think anyone plans a business plan for $600 million. And this is what came out of his mouth. Like literally, this is what he's a real estate guy, and all he did was buy in the West Side and wait. And we talked for a while about how this worked, and I think the real genius was that it wasn't just buying the property that was genius, it was the part of how to hold it, because there are cycles and things go up or down, and so he managed to hold on to the real estate during downturns. A lot of people will overpay and then lose it. So there's that part of it. But there was this thought process about like, how could it be possible that you could just do kind of a generic buy like that, buy and hold over a long period and outperform the market? Like I can see it maybe in short terms with imbalances and shocks and evolutions in the submarkets and cities. There's a whole bunch of ways to think about this, but I didn't quite get it. So I started thinking about this as, whether is there a legitimate way to think about this? One of the story I came up with was luxury goods. So the story here is that the west side of LA is supply constrained, but there are lots of places around the world that are supply constrained. But the difference was that as global GDP is growing and incomes are rising, some portion of that is ending up on the west side of LA. And so as long as the world is getting richer, someone's buying the luxury good and north of Montana there in Santa Monica, and it's driving prices up. Something like that, okay? So that was a storyline. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to find whether I could sort of see whether I could find luxury goods as a consistency in real estate markets. And then from there I started thinking about inferior goods. And I sort of, in that perspective, I started thinking about, well, what would a luxury good look like? And then we have location could be a luxury good. And then we all had inferior goods. And so maybe if you're living in the Antelope Valley and you get your income go up, you spend less money on the Antelope Valley and you move back inside. So if we started thinking about reorganizing locations in a metropolitan area by the kind of good they bring. So there's a normal good element of like the structural element, but the location itself could be a normal good, it could be a luxury good, it could be an inferior good. If you start thinking about things this way, I have some regularities that are going to maybe help us explain why things work the way they work inside a metropolitan area. Okay, so the first process was the line as a luxury good. That was the working title when I first wrote the paper, and I didn't like it after a while, so I moved on to prestige goods as a different kind of concept, a slightly different but important difference. And then recently it's been this move into submarkets. And so one of the things I've always kind of hated about our field is our willingness to sort of treat all housing as a single good. So LA is a single market, I've got a fixed effect for LA. And I've always hated statements like that because I always feel like there's lots of diversity inside of LA that we don't control for well, and you lose things when you make statements like that. So I started looking at submarkets, internal MSAs, and I've gotten some traction on that stuff, and I'll get to that stuff in a minute. And then the other thing I've been doing recently is thinking about longer term persistence in LA and in metropolitan areas. And I've got some evidence here, and I'll walk through this one, but there's an awful lot of stability in the internal structure of metropolitan areas. And so we spend a lot of time as urban economists and housing economists thinking about the things that change. So incomes change, tax rates change, public policy changes, and then we go and look and try to, we do a lot of work to control for all the other stuff in a metropolitan area. And then very rarely do we step back and think about what's the sum of all those things. And so we got a paper out with Tom Malone in RSUE last year called Persistence of Shock and Ossification. And so what we found is that places that were organized in 1970 from a rank perspective are very persistent over time. And I got some evidence of that one also. So but what I was trying to figure out in that work, we just sort of documented it. It wasn't really kind of very rigorous. It was just kind of documenting it, is I wanted to explain why that occurred. So what's driving long-term persistence across places that are really, really dynamic metropolitan areas? So that's for double that one. Today this is my preview today that the formal economics is, formal empirical work has kind of got shelved. I found some data problems over the last week and I have not gotten happy with it, so I had to pull that stuff, and I'm going to do more sort of informal empirics today. I think the regularities will drive the key results. And then I'm going to talk about a little bit what's next, what I'm going to call endogenous stability. And this one's just a preview of we find places like Las Vegas, like Houston, Charlotte, places that have gone through great disorganization over the last couple of years. So starting in 1970, they were markedly different places than they are today. So they've continued to grow and revolve and evolve in dramatic ways, and they've reorganized. But over time, they've gotten more and more stable. So a place like Houston, which is sort of famous for not having regulation of any sort of formal regulation, it's become very stable over time. So over the last couple of decades, it's gotten more stable over time, even though it's not the regulation that necessarily it's wholly in place. So I've got a couple things moving on here. I'll go through it as we get time. Okay. So in terms of stability, so I like LA as an example of a place that is really, really dynamic. So this is 1940. The blue dots here are African Americans, yellow here is whites, and then there's some green dots here which are Asian. So this is 1940. This is 1960, and so you can sort of see the rise of the South Central LA here. There's a pocket up here that appears, pocket up here that appears. Hispanics arrive in East LA, and then by 2000, it's a dramatically different place. Right. So lots and lots of stuff happening here. You wouldn't call this static, right? But these are the correlations between periods from 1970 to 80, 80 to 90, 90 to 2000, and 2010. The slide I skipped, sorry, is the correlation of education, density, income, and house price by rank, by census tract over time. And it showed that the persistence from 1970 to 2010 with house prices is 85%. So the rank of the neighborhoods that have by median house price is 85% from 1970. I think that's a shocking number. So we added 4 million people, whole new freeway system in places. We added a new transit system, manufacturing left, aerospace left. So we've had huge shocks to the basic structure of the economic engine in LA, and yet the places where the rich people were are basically the same places they were 40, 50 years ago. Same thing for the poor areas, and so the overall rank correlation is quite high. This is sort of expanding that work to look across other metropolitan areas. So these are very dynamic places, I think. So LA, Vegas, Houston, and Charlotte are dynamic places. And the numbers are all very high. So there's lots of numbers here. They're lower here, and then they get bigger here. And what I did is the red numbers here are the places where the correlation went down between periods. So the way to read this graph, I think, is to say in every single period from 1980 to 1990, things were this correlated. And then in this period, if they were black, they got higher and higher and higher. So the overwhelming trend here is towards stability. So despite the dynamism, there's lots of stability here. And if you look at a place that's not so dynamic, so this is Bridgeport, Detroit, Indianapolis, and Philadelphia, there's only one period where the correlation didn't get higher. So in these places that aren't so dynamic, population's relatively static here, maybe shrinking in some of these places, is that the rank correlations are all going up. Okay, so this is, I think, very interesting. I don't know. I was surprised to see this correlation be this high. The places that, despite getting bigger, despite changing, despite industry changing, despite technology, all these kind of things we keep talking about as urban economists, the overwhelming trend here is towards stability. Okay, so that's one of the things I want to work on is thinking about hierarchy and how stable it is. So, and I'm going to turn back to luxury goods as a reason for why it might be. Within a metropolitan area, so we're thinking about there's other places being different. So we're thinking about inside of LA here. So where are we? So this is La Brea Tar Pits are right here. So this is West LA. So Beverly Hills is up here. So this is our orientation here. So what I wanted to do here was, this is some of the historic preservation stuff I was working on that Ed was discussing earlier. But this is my perfect example of how distinct submarkets could be inside, how you could orient a submarket inside. And so these are places, these are by the spatial distribution by year built. And so these places are the newest, these places are the oldest, and you can sort of see like the downtowns here, the development of LA was with time, right? So as it grew older, we built more and more houses further from downtown. That seems pretty typical, right? We'd expect that. Right? But if you think about the living area, so this is the amount of internal space to the house, you can see the really different places. Like this place and this place were built at the same time, but this was bigger than this one. Okay, so these are probably higher end location, right? So the developer who built this was built for a different submarket, a higher middle class person. Over here we have much bigger houses. Here we have big houses, here we have houses, and in between them we have lots of small ones. Okay, so you can think about if households, if you have income to support a larger house, maybe these people are sorted into higher income people. Maybe they have a bigger store portfolio, maybe they have more wealth. Shocks to those kind of households might be different. So you might have shocks working their way through the households being organized and clustered here. And then from a lot size perspective, so that was inside the house, this is outside the house. So over here we have big lots, big houses, and then over here we have small lots and big houses. So we have this sort of you can sort of see like immediately the chunkiness of the space. Like, we can think about whether or not they're how to interpret them, but it's this chunkiness that I think is so interesting. That this is distinctly different from this one. When we do our regressions, a lot of us do this, and I do the same thing. Is I have distance from here to here as if I'm controlling for something meaningful. So there's something probably, but I'm probably not looking at this as maybe the same market. So these people are competing for houses that are not the same as this one. So we think about shocks to large households, maybe putting pressure on larger houses relative to those that are small, something like that. Okay. And then in terms of price, and this is where I'm going to head to today, is think about price. And so if you look at this, go back here, we have chunkiness here and very distinct submarkets by lot size, by living area, by age. You can sort of see really good stories for all these things. And then for price, it's a little bit different here. We have lots of upper end here and lots of lower end here, despite the diversity of the housing stock. Right? So this is something else going on here. This is the location. So you can pick up the house and move it across the street, and if it's big or small, it changes value. So we know this too, right? Because we have amenities in here, we have crime or not crime, we have access to jobs, et cetera. All those kind of things are in these regressions also. But it was one more dimension to think about hierarchy and about stability of this hierarchy. So what I'm going to basically tell a story is that these people are going to bid up for the highest. They're the wealthiest people, and they're just going to. It's like the art world. So what's a Monet worth? Whatever the richest person is willing to pay for it. There's no intrinsic value of it, right? It's just a computational physics. So when aggregate wealth gets hit by a stock bubble or something, the price of Monet goes down or up based on that marginal buyer, right? So these people are buying for something else than these people are. So these people are paying more for a prestige good. And what that means for us, I think, and we'll see how it goes, is that this market's going to be paying more for ranking so that when they lose money, they're going to bid less for the prestige for there, but it won't ever cross over, right? So the idea is we're going to have volatility, we're going to have the prestige, the willingness to pay for prestige will go up or down, but it won't ever cross because this is a more prestigious neighborhood than this one. So holding everything else constant, we'll be left with prestige as being a factor that causes volatility, but it will preserve rank, and that's my econometrics today. Okay, so I'll tell you why I couldn't do the more formal stuff in a second. Okay, so in terms of these goods here, we've got normal goods, inferior goods, necessity goods, luxury goods, and the idea when I first started this was I would start thinking about the whole taxonomy of sort of urban areas and how to think about this stuff, and it gets really squishy. So what's a luxury good in housing? I want more schools. Does that make a luxury good? No, that's a normal good, right? So I want more safety. I want more access to better jobs, access to better weather. And so there's all these things here. The title of the paper was going to push on these two things. And so I was going to push on Giffen goods as being sort of this thing that when demand rises, demand for the good rises with price, but it's an inferior good. So think about potatoes. Or Veblen goods where the prices rise, but demand for it goes up also, but it's a luxury good. So we have two things where prices rise for it, but demand for them rise along with it. But it's for one because it's an inferior good and one for a luxury good. So that's what I was going to try to push on. The data set I have built, I got some work with a consulting firm that gave me and paid in data. I had this nice data set for income and all kind of stuff, and that's why I had to kind of pull that because I didn't get a whole of LA County, and I just discovered that on Saturday. So I had I merged things and it didn't work, and I spent all day Saturday. I sent panicked emails to Ed saying, I have to redo this stuff. So I'm going to go back to the simpler stuff, but that's where I'm going to go with this stuff eventually, is to try to think about defining these things. Okay, so how do we do this stuff? How do we handle submarkets? So we have Y is the house price, X beta is the set of characteristics and implicit prices, data delta, there's the time dummy, and then we have this fixed effect and there's sort of noise beyond that. So this is a fixed effects that captures within group. So if we had historic preservation, or we had a good school district, or we had a different city within the metropolitan area, there's a bunch of things we could do there. Access to jobs, consumption amenities, et cetera. But what if this fixed effect in fact is not fixed? And instead we've got some elements, part of it are fixed and part of it are fluctuating. And that's what I'm going to push on here. So are there location amenities that change with time? And certainly that's true. So crime changes over time. We've seen that a lot in metropolitan areas, and it's not been symmetric across space. School districts can change. Weather can change. No, that's not true. Sorry, running away here. But more importantly for me is that do the implicit prices for them change also over time? And so prestige, the beach has always been there, right? So the question is, what do people want to pay for beach access? A little bit more like the Monet again, right? So it's always been there. We're not changing this amenity. It's just been there. The willingness to pay for it's changed over time. And so on this front, and then the next sort of step is, okay, great. Sort of thought this conceptually. Well, why is why is like Santa Monica valuable? Well, because it's amenity. Well, why not San Pedro? Right? So San Pedro has, you guys know where San Pedro is? It's right near the port of Long Beach and Palos Verdes, and it's not a nice neighborhood. It's changing. There's some capital flowing there. It's getting better, but it's decidedly not Santa Monica. And I always talk about this documentary called Dogtown and the Z-Boys. Has anyone seen this? Got one video? Okay. It's a reprehensible movie about skate punks and draining pools and causing problems in Venice. But I always make my undergraduates watch it because I can get them excited about watching something. And what it is, it's a real estate movie, really, because it shows Venice when it's a really crappy neighborhood, empty storefronts, how low on the ankles of the down in the what's the word I'm looking for? Down in the dumps kind of place. Thank you. But it changes, right? So the question is, well, why was Venice a bad place, and why did it change here? And this is the idea: is like, so it changed from an inferior place to a luxury place. And so this interesting question about how you produce luxury. And so on that front, can you create prestige? Because if I could create a prestigious place, like the land around Beverly Hills is a hilly, beautiful area, but there's lots of places like that in California that are decidedly not as expensive, right? So if I could create prestige, I could buy cheap land, create the prestige, and then sell at Beverly Hill prices, and that would be create rents here. And so clearly we have evidence of this, right? Markets are actually trying really hard to create prestige on a regular basis. So everyone, evidently developers like Italian, right? So these are names of subdivisions that are being built somewhere in California right now. I just kind of Googled California new subdivisions. So we have the Piazza Siena, like this one, I like this one too, the Hemingway at Red Hawk. I have no idea what that means, but it feels like smart people are going to be there, right? Okay, so and then the question from removing inferiority. So if you think about as locations as having an inferior element to them, could you remove them? And that's exactly what we've tried to do here with South LA here, right? For it was South Central. When I moved to USC, it was South Central LA, and there were the Blood and the Crips, and there were gangs, and there was Ice T and Ice Cube and those kind of things. We try to rebrand that now as South LA. So this is an opportunity to sort of redefine the place as being not inferior. It's normal good. Not inferior good. It's not a place to flee. It's a place. It's a normal good. So I think this is something I'd like to think about. But the idea here is that, like agglomeration, it's not the land underneath it. It's the location that matters, right? It's the co-location of activities in the same place. And in this case, I'm going to get the co-location of like people. In this case, maybe the rich, who bid for each other to be with each other. That's it. Okay. All right. So there's lots of literatures here. I've been pushing here, and this is way too short here. But in the luxury area, there's lots of papers on this stuff, and there's an old literature. I like this. I found this one on real estate. There's Gary Painter's got a paper out. Where's Gary? His is mostly about consumption, consumption of luxury goods. The one I like, this Nanda and Ye paper, is a Journal of Asian Economics paper, and they've got this great phrase: reflected glory or repulsive envy. So they're splitting the world into these two places. One where, if you're going to build a rich house, if you build a big house and an ostentatious house in a poor neighborhood, you will receive repulsive envy. And so you avoid that. So the reason that people sort is because they might like to stay in their neighborhood, but if you build this thing, you will create repulsive envy. And so that causes you to leave. And so if you want to live, if you want to build a big house and consume a luxury good, you should go do it in luxury good neighborhoods, because then you'll have reflective glory. So if you build the big house here, you get reflected glory. If you build it in the bad neighborhood, your neighbors hate you through repulsive envy. Anyways, so there's some literature out there about this stuff in real estate. There's very little of it, I think, in terms of location and luxury. In terms of submarkets, there's lots of literature on this stuff, and this is another big literature on this stuff. Steve Barras, I think I like he's got a great paper called "Do Submarkets Matter?" So I like that one. It's a good start. And then sorting, another part. Intrinsically, this is a story about sorting, right? So you have luxury houses sorting into luxury goods. We got Tibu, Schilling, a whole bunch of papers here about those things. Yeah, okay. And then persistence, and again, one of these few things I think a lot of we don't do enough of in urban economics is thinking about long-term persistence. But there's these great papers, the Davis and Weinstein papers about Hiroshima, and after the place was leveled by the atomic bomb, they built it back the same way, the same grid. So they didn't sort of re-optimize it. So if you think about the reason we don't fix Boston is because it was just too expensive to actually scrape it and then have everyone leave for a while and come back and make it optimal. We're still stuck with those crappy, small, narrow streets. But we can't do that because of the fixed effect. I mean, the fixed investment there, we wouldn't do that. But in the case of Hiroshima, there was a chance to do that, and they did, and they built exactly the same thing. So there's this idea there's this persistence beyond forces, just beyond physical capital. And then this stuff here at the bottom, I've got a paper here, but this stuff I'm going to get to towards the end here, and what I'm going to get at on this part is that if once you start thinking about submarkets as being meaningful, and if they do have a life of their own, and they may be correlated with the overall market, housing market in the metropolitan area, if they deviate, then our approach to a lot of the empirical work we do may be wrong. So this is the difference in differences require two places to have the same parallel shift, and these submarkets really are working differently, and I got pictures for that one also. Okay, so here's my informal empirical approach. Okay, so here's Los Angeles. So I went with the data that I trusted. So this is a little bit dated now. The newer data has the same pattern, but I was unsure of it from 2005 forward, so I just truncated it for here. So we have the three zip codes that were in LA were up here. This is their median price, and then we have the median price for LA County, and then we have Compton down here, right? So no surprise here that Beverly Hills is more expensive. Visually, it looks like it's a lot more volatile, right? If you stack them next to each other, sort of pick a normalizing point there, then you can sort of see that Beverly Hills actually, if you invested $1 here, you experience more volatility and ended up with a lower return. So it's some basic way, over this period, Compton dominated Beverly Hills from an investment perspective. I don't think you'd ever heard that say that before, okay? But at least during this period, it was true. This might be a function of subprime happening over here, but my story is about rank and volatility. So I think visually you can sort of see that it's more volatile. Beverly Hills goes up and down more frequently. The other part of the story I have for luxury goods here being consistent, the land market being consistent with luxury goods, is that we have more volatility and rank persistence. And this is the persistence story. So over the course of this part of the sample period, Beverly Hills was number 1, 2, or 3. I think it dipped to number 4 up here at some point. Compton made a big rush up here to something there. But these are places that were decidedly top of the market, decidedly bottom of the market, and there was some noise around them, but there was no sense that the changes in LA caused these places to be reorganized in a meaningful way. Little mood music. All right, awesome. Thank you. Okay, and then so in order to sort of generalize from those two kind of extreme points, I took all of the zip codes here, and then just took them in 2000 and said the beginning period was my base period, ranked them by those things, broke into quartiles, and then did the same thing over again by median prices, and then normalized by the first one. So this is the first quartile this is the first quartile here, and then I track it over time, and then I normalize that because I want to make apparent the difference between the base and the top. And it's this distance that I care about. So two things happen. One is that no matter where I start this is true, is that this group always stays in the first quartile and doesn't cross it. So there's no crossing here. And the volatility is much more pronounced at the top than at the bottom. So the higher you get in the rankings, the more volatility there is. And so you can do this kind of all day long. Here's 6. And so the numbers here, the y-axis goes from 3 to 4, and then above that. So if you do this in like 10 periods, this is 8 periods, 10. But the point here is that no matter, I think where Sheridan was, I'm getting is like, yes, this is something that's true, but it's the consistent expression over that I'm focused on. So I think if I did it differently, it would be okay. Yeah. So this is what the luxury story says that as the economy is getting better, people spend more on a luxury good, and this is the location, right? So the location of the premium, I'm paying more for the premium to be in that top quartile or top decile, whatever it is, over time, right? Okay. So. Yeah, okay. So this is the question about volatility versus base price. And so take a zip code on the base price in 1988, and then the volatility, standard deviation in price during that time period. So these things are correlated this way, but this is the better one. So in terms of rank volatility, so if you look at the places where the ranks are moving up or down during the time period, is that as the house price, where I started in 1988, so the more expensive where I started in 1988, I get the sort of up and then down pattern. So all of the ranking changes are here. Sort of people in the middle class are kind of bumping around in the middle over the long period. The people who were at the top stay at the top. So we have rank persistence there. Okay. So, and then the other thing I think about this one is the spatial orientation around this one is, so what I worry about in this one is that I have prices going up and down, and it could be other things, right? It could be crime, it could be, there's lots of things. I'm appealing to luxury here, but I don't have any real evidence of this stuff, or I'm not measuring it directly. So it could be other things, and so it could be, schools, crimes, drive, whatever. There's lots of amenities and stuff. So this is a picture of LA County. Here's the Pacific Ocean. So the Beverly Hills, Pacific Palisades numbers are up here. They're 20. These are the highest places. And then South LA are here's number 1. And the instead of deciles, it's whatever the number for 20 is. So they're broken into 20 rankings. So is there a number? Is there a name for that? There must be, right? Does anyone know? Ving tile? Okay. So these are the Ving tiles. That's fun. I like saying that. Thank you. And the point I put it this way spatially is I feel like the story about I don't think school equality is changing rapidly during this time period. I think the drop in crime is likely, I think, from my perspective, I have data on this now, but it's part of the other stuff I couldn't do, is that crime is asymmetric around the region, but if anything, it was the lower end that got less crime, relatively speaking, over time. So they got these are the places that should have appreciated faster than over here because the crime was low here, it was very high here. And then the other thing I like about this one is that if I look at a map of LA, and we have this map of downtown LA, and I'm an urban economist, so I think about monocentric models all the time. So we have this amenity out here, we have this amenity here, and so, but the spaces things, there's lots of places, like Pasadena's out here, this is San Marino out here in Pasadena. Over here is Hacienda Heights. So there's a 10 minutes really? So there's a luxury neighborhood out in Hacienda Heights. Anyone been out there? So it went and drove, when I saw this data point, I went and drove it, and it's a really nice neighborhood. It's the top of a hill. And so, my sense is that when these people make it in the world and decide to move up the hill for prestige, they don't go to Beverly Hills. That's not their market, right? So prestige is a relative thing. So we have prestige in locations, we have contrast between here and here, which is what I'm thinking about as prestige. Yeah, so, okay, let me do Stockholm real quick and then I'll start wrapping things up. So for Stockholm, I've got much better data. I've got every housing sale in the country for 18 years. During the course of their housing bubble. And the Swedish do a very good job keeping track of the data, so it's a really detailed, it's got, it's a copper roof, slate roof, it's got, it's really detailed numbers, so they all are taxing based on hedonics, and so they've got all this data and they share it. So I spent 2 summers cleaning up this data and putting it together. And this is the outcome of a regression where I've omitted the low end, so I ranked places again, and then the omitted fixed effect is that neighborhood. And so these are all premiums for location relative to that omitted tract, okay? And then so, again, what I was looking for was the same qualitative story I saw in LA, which is, this is the low end, and over time, things spread next to it. It was volatile next to it, so that was consistent with that one. And then that's in Stockholm, where I think there actually is an active luxury market. I'm sure you guys have been there. There's just some Strandvägen, and there's some great neighborhoods that are really decidedly awesome. And this is here, right? So up in the north of Sweden, I picked the farthest place from luxury. So we're way up north. There's one region that's the very farthest north. And here I picked in the base numbers here. And you can sort of see here that this is where the base is. And there's kind of migrating all over the place here. And so, again, this is from trying to look for, making basic inferences about luxury in a region where there really is very little luxury. This was the most expensive neighborhood, and you could sort of see the older stock there and the higher quality of the data. Everything else was just sort of a normal good. So there wasn't a premium luxury location for the north of Sweden. Okay, a couple things to wrap it up. So what does this mean? I got a picture for Wichita I want to show you too, but what it means is I think this is my pitch about submarkets, is this was for Sweden. So when we do hedonic regressions as a habit here, and we're well trained in those things, and that's important to take care of the physical heterogeneity of the good itself. The locational heterogeneity actually matters quite a bit now. So in a place like Stockholm, where prices are rising and more of the heterogeneity is due by the location of the asset, not the building on top of it, is that you run a horse race here between hedonic regression with physical characteristics, this one, and then here with just location dummies, and then with both. And so with both, you get more information. Explanatory power goes higher. But by the end of the period, I could do as well as a hedonic regression with just dummies for the location. So the heterogeneity was just the census tract, or the Forschemlung, the parish that it was part of. So if I could just cite that one, I would do a better job explaining things. Up north, it's the same story. Now, actually, I get more explanatory power from just looking at the dummies from the location relative to the physical structures on their own. And then the other thing I think is interesting is that when you start including more flexibility into the structure of the fixed effects, you get different outcomes for the coefficients. So if we care about the coefficients from a policy perspective, then what are the marginal costs of whatever we're looking at, is that with and without the numbers, these numbers are decidedly different. So here we get a negative outcome, and here we get a positive one. And so what ends up happening is because the characteristics, we saw that picture from West Hollywood, is that because those places are characteristics are clustered, they're shared, they're correlated with other things. And so when you don't have space controlled for well in your regression, that means that the coefficients themselves are doing some of the work. They're correlated with it. And so I worry about these things happening as we get these shifts because of the characteristics are themselves being correlated with the omitted variable, in this case, the locational differences. So we get these things over time. All right, so one more thing and I will stop. Is Wichita. So I got a co-author in Wichita, and so he's got good data in Wichita, and I thought, this is the place I'm not going to find anything here because it's Wichita. Land is free. I can build, and the periphery is just a couple minutes away, and I'm not going to find anything. And I found these are, so you ran the regressions, we did a whole bunch of stuff here. So this is my favorite results here is this one we get. This is the marginal cost, the marginal price of a land of square foot. So in the core, we get a higher marginal price for an extra square feet of the parcel, right? Out here, it's all the same. There's not much of a premium, right? Close to zero, because land is free, and that's what we expect, right? For an interior square foot, we get a little more spatial variation here. In here, people pay a bigger premium for an internal square foot. So there's all these big houses that are being built at the periphery, and people pay more for the square foot out there. But the age variable, I don't know if you can see it here on this map, but we get nothing, we got kind of noise here, white noise here, and then over here we have this big premium, and the stuff around it's not the same. And so this is luxury in in Wichita. So in Wichita, there's a place called Campus Hill. And so there's, it's an old industry, it's an old city. It's had manufacturing there for a long time, and they've had millionaires there. So the aerospace is there. And it turns out when you make it in Wichita, you move to Campus Hill. So these houses are gorgeous. They're Victorians, built in the late 1800s. They're really pretty. And then so what happens is when the market goes up or down, this place is the most volatile. So when aerospace does well, this place does better. And so that's it. So some noise there. But so anyway, so what was the paper about today? Differentiating goods with taking real estate and sort of thinking about it as a differentiated good besides just normal goods. Thinking about the implications of that for housing markets and submarkets. I have this particular interest in sort of thinking about how to explain persistence over time. And we got a lot of evidence that there is persistence over time. I'm trying to explain that stuff. And then from a policy perspective, I'm not so sure what to do with it next, but I feel like somehow, we don't do transportation subsidies for luxury goods. We don't sort of subsidize Mercedes. But if we sort of think of Beverly Hills as a luxury market, should we be doing subsidizing to be, we think about housing as being a right kind of thing. We have that kind of policy. It gets complicated when we start thinking about things as being luxury goods or inferior goods. So we'll change that one. Anyways, we're out of time. Okay.
So thanks to the organizers for inviting me to discuss this paper by Chris Redfearn. As soon as I heard Chris's name as the author of the paper I was going to discuss, I knew I was in for it, because Chris is a constant tinkerer with his papers. And so I have several emails from Chris saying, I'm going to get the final version to you. Tomorrow's going to get the final version, final version. And it will not. So it didn't surprise me that the first, I think, 14 slides I had not seen before. They were not in the original paper. So I'm gonna talk about things that Chris probably didn't talk so much about, and I'm gonna leave out all the interesting stuff, which was the stuff he talked about today. Another introductory comment: I was born in San Pedro, and it was a lovely place to grow up in for my first 5 years of life. My grandfather was actually the chief of agricultural inspections at the LA Harbor. So it was that was a pretty cool thing. So anyway, yeah, so this is really neat stuff. Chris is obsessed with submarkets. I think I've discussed 4 or 5 papers of his over the years. In fact, I have this vague memory that I discussed this paper maybe in like 2012. It's really interesting stuff, and he's got a lot of great maps and things, and all that should actually go into the paper. So let me talk about the things that interested me. Okay, so what's the basic point here? That the rankings of submarket prices are relatively constant, because prestige is prestige, and Beverly Hills is never going to be less expensive than Compton, but it's never going to be less expensive than Canoga Park or something. So that's interesting, and the persistence of these rankings is quite notable. The part that I'm going to concentrate on, but he didn't talk about so much here, is that the volatility of prestige markets is greater, roughly speaking, because prestige is a fixed supply. They're not going to build any more homes in Beverly Hills. It's all built up, and so when there's fluctuations in demand, it's going to be reflected in price, not the quantity of houses that are prestigious, and that this is going to be correlated with rich people's income. So the premium on prestige is going to go up and down according to how big a difference there is between rich people, really rich people's income, and people who are not so rich, is what Chris Rock might say, the difference between being rich and being wealthy. Wealthy people buy the really prestigious neighborhoods. And so the implicit assumption here is that kind of income that creates wealth that buys prestige locations is somehow more volatile. Okay, so in the paper there's a kind of a sketch of a theory model, and I'm really going to look forward to this because I think it's going to be very, very difficult to tease all this out and have Giffen goods and inferior goods and normal goods and luxury goods all in the same model across the quality spectrum for houses. I think it's going to be great. What was I going to say about this? And so it seems like what he wants to do is to kind of allow this model to be able to simulate the volatility and the relative rankings of these neighborhoods. And there's some issues. There's a couple of issues here. One is that yes, there's a fixed supply of prestige, but he's going to have to deal with the fact that in the negative direction, everything's inelastic. This is the old Glaser-Jerko argument that if there's a decrease in demand, basically the supply is perfectly inelastic because you're not going to tear anything down just because rich people's or poor people's income might go up or down. And then he's going to, it seems like he's going to want to use portfolio income as the empirical identifier. That portfolio income is going to be in the theoretical model, but he's going to use that as a motivator to try and identify changes in rich people versus poor people's income. And I think it'd be wonderful if you got portfolio income by city. I don't think that exists, and so I'm a little worried about that. But there are other ways of getting around that. Okay, so this is kind of a base figure. I took this as kind of the baseline figure from the paper, which shows that Beverly Hills is more volatile than Compton, right? But you'll notice where this stops. It stops in 2005, just as things were getting interesting in the housing market. So you know, the FHFA now has zip code price indexes. They're annual, so you don't get any seasonality. I think I observed this slide is twice a year, every 6 months, and if you stare hard enough, I think there's seasonality in this, but if you use annual, there's no seasonality, and so I went to the data. And so these are ZIP 5 indexes, all based at year 2000. So the blue line is 90221, that's kind of the central Compton. And 90210 is, of course, Beverly Hills. Maybe Beverly Hills is more volatile here, but once the boom and bust hit, I think that's quite arguable. I think that Compton is actually more volatile. It's certainly got a bigger jump in the boom and a bigger decline in the during the bust. And so you do this for I did this for Las Vegas because I spent a couple of years there. So I took, there is no zip code in Las Vegas that's purely associated with luxury. So I took my zip code when I lived there. I was trying to capture Anthem Country Club, and I lived adjacent to Anthem Country Club. So anyway, and then this is North Las Vegas, which is a very low income area, and it's also where a lot of the housing speculation took place during the boom and bust period. And again, the boom is, remember these are indexes relative to 2000. The boom's identical, but the drop is much bigger in North Las Vegas in the low income area. So I'd argue that volatility means something. When you talk about volatility, it means something different in the boom and bust period, and it's more volatile in these low income areas. I think that's due to speculation. I think that's due to investor demand, right? I think that's pretty obvious. And I think you have to expand what you're thinking about when you talk about volatility to talk about when you talk about investment versus consumption demand, and the question of whether or not investors are interested in the prestige in the same way that home buyers are. I mean, yes, they're going to resell them, but. And then here's Wichita, where my guess is there's not as much speculative demand. And so this is College Hill. One of the zip codes in College Hill. There's like 6. And then I just pulled one, because I don't know Wichita at all. I just pulled one from the suburbs. And they're kind of equally volatile. So in places where, and there is no kind of boom-bust cycle the way there is in these other places. So I think when you talk about volatility, you gotta think about speculators, or at least investment demand, because these low-income neighborhoods, particularly in Las Vegas, but maybe in Compton as well, it's the low-income neighborhoods that were the target for the flippers and the speculators and the people who were even the buy to rent people were interested in low-income neighborhoods rather than the high-income neighborhoods. But otherwise, I mean, it's a really interesting set of results, and I look forward to Chris's further explorations of this.